Dr. Levine, thank you so much. It was an honor to have you open up our 2016 Innovation Recovery Conference here in San Diego with your keynote this morning. So thank you for the time.
Oh, glad to do it.
One of the things that you started your talk this morning on, and I wish for our audience who's watching this video on YouTube could have been in the room personally, was that slide you had with that quote, that there is a voice that doesn't use words. And I wonder if you might just elaborate on that just for a few seconds on where you saw that quote and how that has really impacted you in developing the somatic experience.
The quote is by Rumi, the Sufi poet of the, I think the 12th century. And the quote is, there's a voice that doesn't use words, listen. And that was the title of one of my two recent books, In an Unspoken Voice, How the Body Releases Trauma and Restores Goodness. That there is this language, and we all practice it. When we are with somebody, we think that the content of what we're saying is what's important. It ain't so. What we convey with our posture, with our gestures, with our facial expression, is 95+% of the communication. The verbal content is only a few small percentage. So we do it all the time, but if we know how to engage that therapeutically, we have a tremendously powerful way to access the healing power, our innate healing powers, the wisdom of the body.
Do you see yourself in the research that you did early on in your career? Do you see yourself as connecting maybe this older or more ancient wisdom and then being able to connect that with what you see in studying animals and their response to trauma?
That's a good question. All of these, for me, have come together. Understanding why animals in the wild are not routinely traumatized the way humans are, and what it is that we may have lost that animals in the wild utilize, and that this innate capacity to rebound, the term that's often used is resilience. It's a natural capacity. And the route to that is through the body, through body sensing, through body awareness. And to me, that's what Rumi's poem is about. That's the other language. That's this deep language. And when we learn to attend to it, and we have to quiet ourselves because we're so busy, engaged with what's going on our devices, that we lose this contact. And I think more and more have lost this. But it's interesting though, I think sometimes sometimes things go to a certain point where you don't think it could be getting any worse, and it does, and then things start to shift and then start to change. And I think in a way, this disconnection we have in our body is paradoxically calling us to reconnect with our bodies, with the sensing, intelligent, knowing body.
It was really fascinating to see the video clip you showed of the young Marine who had fought in Iraq and Afghanistan and had that post-traumatic stress disorder, and how it was almost like he was resistant in the first few minutes of your conversation, and then he let go, and he talked about that, post, I guess it was a few months or a year after his first session. Are you seeing that the Veterans Administration, do you see that that other thought leaders in this industry are open, as Ray became open to these types of trauma healing experiences?
Well, I'm afraid that it seems like the VA may be the last. But I think things are changing. Actually, there are a number of VAs in which there are somatic experiencing practitioners who are working there. I hear stories often, like the supervisor will say, I don't know what you're doing, it's working, don't tell me what you're doing, keep doing it. So I think things get in, underneath. And again, it was such a catastrophic consequences of the way people were being treated that I think it brings us to the need for at least considering other methods. And we began research through our trauma healing organization, which is important because you have to have evidence-based. But I think what's most important is when people have some deep shift in themselves, then other people ask them, well, what happened? You seem so different. Or they tell other people about their experience. And I think it's word of mouth that's probably the biggest informer, even more so than all kinds of published articles. It certainly has been that way with my organization. I mean, recently now, as I say, we have had several research studies, some outcome studies, and a number of studies in responding to large-scale disasters. But I think people know when something really in them has changed. And I'm not in any way negating some of the other approaches, the behavioral approaches, the cognitive and behavioral approaches. They're also extremely valuable. But without also enlisting the knowing, living, sensing body, we really are limited in how deep these shifts will be. And when we bring them together, we really touch people at their deepest roots.
You know, you mentioned word of mouth, and that really resonated, especially with after your talk was finished this morning, that we were able to give our Heroes in Recovery Award for this year. And a young man named Richard Noble in Palm Springs was the honorary. You know, when we started Heroes in Recovery, we were reflecting on the life of Betty Ford when we came up with the idea. And so many people knew her from her work in our industry with creating the Betty Ford Clinic.
Sure.
But it was really 2 years before she shared her struggle with alcoholism that she came on the national scene, being one of the first prominent figures to discuss breast cancer.
That's right.
And we were reflecting on where breast cancer as a national, breast cancer awareness as a national social movement in the preceding 40 years has gone, whereas addiction and mental health was still stigmatized. And we felt the need to encourage society to share stories. And I think it's really appropriate what you just said about SC and somatic experience, how that word of mouth, you know, is so important.
Yeah, that's right. I remember when Betty Ford came out of the closet, as it were, and revealed, and it was a quiet revolution, but make no mistake, it was a revolution. Things really changed after that. And her husband, too, really a decent man. Unusually decent for a president, you know.
Well, and it's amazing in this day and age with all the technology, you know, that all of our children and grandchildren, you know, have at their fingertips, how that word of mouth is now, you know, so evident,
amplified.
Online. Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is a unique time. And so I think in as much as it's taken away from ourselves, it's also probably going to be what brings us back to ourselves.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us here in San Diego and to share your research and your experience, and we're just grateful to have you among us.
I was glad to meet all you folks and to learn a little bit more about your organization and what you've been doing.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah.